Welcome to Writing the Wrong Way, a podcast for readers who want something strange and exciting, and writers who need something new. If you want to support this podcast, please consider buying my new book, The National Gallery. I'm extremely proud of this book because it may be my best book, and it is certainly my most personal and heartfelt book. But just because I say it's heartfelt doesn't mean it isn't full of weirdness, like sonnets about Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and elegies for my dead iPhone. For a limited time, if you buy a copy of the National Gallery directly from me, I will sign it, and I will also send you a signed copy of my previous book, The Politics of Knives, for no additional cost. So you can order the book and get your free book with it at thenationalgallery.ca. That's thenationalgallery.ca. I'm also excited because it is my 10-year anniversary as an author. My first book, Ex Machina, was published in October 2009, and to celebrate, now that it is 2019, as I record this, I've made Ex Machina available as an ebook for the first time. It was never available as an ebook previously, and I'm giving that ebook away for free at jonathanball.com/freebook. So go to jonathanball.com/freebook, and you can sign up, get all my exciting news when it's exciting and new, and other free resources that I'll just send you as I create them, plus a free book. And again, you can go to thenationalgallery.ca if you want to find out more about my new book and get a free book as well when you order that. So two free books and a paid book available to you. In any case, let's get into the show. I'm here with Lyndon Radchenka, who is going to talk to us about his comics writing, and you're also a letterer for comics?
I am a letterer, yes.
So you've done two books at this point yourself with some artists. Mm-hmm. So first, Infinite Universe with Stephen Call.
Yes.
And then, most recently, What Will Not Last, an anthology. You call it an anthology of beginnings.
Yes.
So you, in this anthology, it has 4 stories in it. You wrote all the stories.
I did.
And then partnered with 4 different artists, one of whom is Stephen Call, again, Jim B. Kmichik as well, Zach Schuster, and Christopher Smith for that book. And can you talk a little bit about just sort of how you started getting interested in writing for comics? So did you start working as a letterer first, or did that kind of come later, or was that very connected?
No. We like to joke that I became a letterer because I wanted to save money, but that's the worst. Yeah. If you talk to a letterer, they're just going to be really insulted when you say that. But to start kind of right at the beginning, and I'll walk all the way through it, was I have an English degree background. I got my BA from the University of Manitoba. But like most, kids in the 90s, I grew up watching a lot of Batman cartoons on Saturday mornings. So I was always into superhero stuff. I never actually got into comics until probably my late teens, 17, 18, 19, in that range, that I started really getting into reading comics outside of the mainstream stuff.
You were late coming to comics. So what comics got you into comics?
I think the first comic I picked up was Batman #1 of the New 52 reboot by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo. Scott Snyder was still a reasonably new comics writer at the time. He'd done some titles. He'd done a really good arc of Detective Comics. He'd done American Vampire. I'm not sure if he'd started Witches with Jock yet, but Greg Capullo is known from his work on Spawn, and has gone back and done a lot of Spawn work recently. But it was only then that I started kind of collecting comics again and reading comics. And it was out over the next 2 years that I was reading comics. I met Stephen Call when we were bartending at the Keg together. He had his fine arts degree, and I was working on my English degree. And kind of the funny story of how this started was we traveled to San Diego Comic-Con together because we both liked comics and pop culture and everything that San Diego was about. And we kept seeing indie comics on the shelves there and joking that we should make our own book, which we didn't do when we came back. That was in 2015. Obviously, I've known GMB Kmichik Gregory for a number of years before that, so I got to see kind of what he was doing as he was getting his career off the ground also, and away from his previous career into full-time comics.
How did you know Gregory?
So Gregory taught at the school that I went to, but he never taught me.
Okay.
So I knew him, tangentially in the area, but he was never a teacher of mine.
So, sorry, what year was this that you went to the U of M and got your BA then?
So yeah, I started at U of M in 2011, and I graduated the fall semester of 2014.
Okay, yeah.
So it took me 3.5 years.
I went to U of M as well and did a BA and an MA from like 98 to 2005. And then I did my PhD in Calgary.
Yeah, you were clearly there before me.
Yeah, but it sounds like we were kind of getting into comics around the same time, because I also came relatively late to it. Like I, of course, had read some comics growing up. But the one I remember, the way you remember that particular comic was, I remember picking up, I would just go, I was in a very small town, and after church, the deal was, if I'd go to church with my mom and not cause a hassle, then after church, she would have to buy me a comic. And me and my brother would go, we'd go to the corner store near the church and buy a comic. But of course, they would just have random comics. Yeah. Because it's just this weird small town. Yeah. And I remember so we'd just buy any comic that was there. Yeah. Just to have a comic. Yeah. And I remember the one that really got to me was it was Sandman number 8, I believe it was.
Is that the one with death in it?
Yes. But Sandman's not even in it for the whole comic till the very. I think he shows in the last panel. And it's just him slaughtering people in this restaurant in bizarre manners. And it was the strangest and darkest thing I'd ever seen. Okay. And it was the actual reprint of the Sandman, so it wasn't the original run. Again, I was kind of so late that they were literally just issue after issue reprinting this comic. Yeah. And they never had any previous Sandman comics. They never had another one. Yep. And they just for some reason had this one weird issue, and it just stuck with me as a comic that just showed me the writing possibilities. Mm-hmm. So what was it about that comic in particular that kind of stuck with you?
The easy answer is that I was just a huge Batman fan to start with, but the way that whatever writing style Scott Snyder used, combined with Capullo's art, just kind of hooked me in. And what's kind of widely accepted about their run, their whole run is reasonably well received and it gotten a lot of acclaim. But their first arc was very strong, especially for a new creative team, and they were doing a few different experimental things that weren't usually done in mainstream comics. So that kind of hooked me in and kept me reading more books.
Yeah, that was the thing for me with that Sandman. I'd never seen a comic like that ever before or since, where the main character isn't in the comic, and it's a weird self-contained issue. It was one of the most violent things that I've ever seen. Yeah. The violence was very creative and fascinating. And then Dave McKean was doing the cover, they're reprinting all his cover, and it was just a beautiful, strange. Just the cover just did not look like a comics cover. So just all these weird little boxes that started to check for me in terms of just something I'd never seen before.
Do you find that because you've said you've come late to comics too, in any of the work of comics or making comics that you've been doing?
Well, I haven't really made any comics.
Well, writing in itself or anything that you would consider, similar to a comics medium or the way that storytelling is done, do you find that you're, I'm not going to say chasing after that sort of storytelling, but kind of the feel that comic gave you when you first came across it?
I feel I feel like that was there's 3 or 4 really formative things that maybe aren't my favorite things in the world, but I think just were the influences. Absolutely. It's one to me is Moby Dick, the novel Moby Dick. One is that comic, that particular Sandman issue, which isn't, I think, one of the more famous Sandman issues necessarily, but just one that really struck me in a certain way. There's Satanic Verses by Salman Rushdie is another one, just has this weird architecture, and there's a handful of things like that, that I just, for whatever reason.
There are formative things in every creative's journey path.
Well, I think the commonality for me, and I think probably for a lot of people, is there's certain things that just make you look at the medium a certain way. You notice it for the first time, you start to notice how it's put together, or you just notice, or for whatever reason, it makes it seem like it's somehow possible for you to do. That wasn't something that I really got out of that Sandman issue, but I remember watching Clerks by Kevin Smith. That was the first time I watched a movie, and then I immediately rewound the movie and watched it again. Because one hand I enjoyed it, but on the other hand, I just felt I could maybe do something like this. Like it's within the realm of reason that I could create a thing like that.
Yeah. I found I had a similar experience. I'm still going to talk about Batman comics apparently today.
Batman's great.
The first issue of Tom King's run in Batman, I want to say it came out in 2016. But Tom King in the very first issue did something that I wasn't used to in a common, because at that point I'd been reading Batman for years. In a common Batman comic was it was a very emotional. There was a very emotional moment towards the end of the issue that was something that I wouldn't expect from a Batman comic. Kind of an internal, almost cathartic moment.
Sure.
I remember I finished that issue and I went, this might be the single best issue, like standalone issue that I've read or that I've enjoyed the most. I'm not going to say it's the best issue I've read, but one of the most enjoyable single issues that I've ever read. And that was kind of a clicking moment where I thought, I wish, or I want to be able to write comics that are going to have this emotional impact to them. It's not all just action and adrenaline and big explosive fun, but there's also can be an emotional connection to it.
So that's when you started to kind of get interested in comics as a writer. So you see, you kind of came to lettering through just, wanting, just you seeing it as connected to the writing.
Yeah. To go back to my own history lesson, I'd gone to school in Calgary, and after my first year, Stephen had approached me about doing a comic together, where he obviously would do the art and I would do the writing. But because mainstream comics is such a team activity, you have your writer and you have in a normal assembly line version, you have your writer, then you have your penciler, then your inker, then your colorist, then your letterer, then obviously your editor. Then the writer would get the lettered pages back. They'd get to do kind of a revision pass. The letterer would get it again, and then it would get sent off to the printer. And Stephen was obviously going to do the penciling, the inking, the coloring, all of the artwork of it, and I was going to write it. But I found that after I'd written a script, suddenly none of it was in my hands anymore. You had to hand it off to someone else, and I wanted to play a larger role on the team, as it were. So I decided that I would try and learn lettering. And if you talk to any person on the internet that wants to make a comic, they always say to hire a letterer, don't skimp on the lettering. And I clearly ignored that advice because I decided to do my own lettering. But I took there's enough material online these days that it feels like you can learn how to do almost anything if you put enough time into it and you really put the work in. So I learned how to do some basic lettering. I joined a couple of communities on the internet, and I got a few gigs doing other people's projects for them, and that allowed me to practice and get better. Meanwhile, also doing the lettering for my own book. And I mean, I probably took 3 or 4 passes at this book as my skills would improve. So if you take a look at what the book looked like, the first couple pages looked like on my first attempt, it's not good at all. It's awful.
So what drew you though to like go down the rabbit hole of lettering versus at a certain point just thinking, I'm spending so much time lettering when I could be writing?
I enjoyed it.
You started to really get into it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. What the nice thing about lettering your own writing is you also get the final say on what it's going to look like at the end. So a lot of the script that I had written, I reworked in the lettering process to fit with the artwork better. And that's a lot harder to do if you're a writer who can't letter and you're having to dictate this to someone else.
We kind of skipped a part, but like, what got you from you guys are joking about doing a comic to like, let's actually do a comic? Like, what kind of bridged that gap?
There wasn't really a bridge. It was just we were joking about it one day, and then another day, Stephen decided he wanted to pursue comics and pursue art a little more in his life than he was at that time. And he asked me if I'd be interested in looking at doing a comic with him. I had the time. It was summer break in my schedule, and then I came from as I said, a creative background, so writing was something that I enjoyed doing. So I said, yeah, absolutely, let's try it. So we did a lot of question asking to everyone who would give us answers, and we just kind of dove in and did whatever we could along the way.
So what did you do to try to teach yourself the writing side of it?
So writing, how do I explain this? So the first thing you do is you read a lot of comics. But I also came from a theater minor in my English background. So theater minor, when you're writing scripts, it's a lot of dialogue with stage direction. I didn't find it to be a jarring difference from writing a comic script. Obviously, there's some template differences. In some places, you need a little bit more definition. But there are books on writing descriptive panels, and there's a great place to start is always Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud. But there's enough material out there that you can write a script if you go looking for the right resources. So I was lucky enough that I came from a background that kind of gave me a sense of how I wanted to write it. A lot of the way that I write scripts now, and the same as I always have, is I always start with the dialogue, and then I fill in the story beats and the panel descriptions as I go along.
That's something Gregory actually once advised me to do. Like I come from a screenwriting background in a lot of respects, and so I see like some connections between screenwriting and comics. Yeah. Though, like you said, there are some major differences.
Yep.
But one thing that's approach to kind of writing the dialogue first, then filling in the story beats, I found is a useful approach for a couple ways. But one is you just don't write a lot of stuff that is unnecessary.
Yeah.
You know, like because I found what was happening to me in screenwriting is I would write all this stuff, and then I'd be going in my editing process, I'd just be taking things out, and so often replacing it with just like a quick line of like an action or a line of dialogue. And sometimes I would take the dialogue out and just replace it with an action. But you know, otherwise, like it was getting stripped down to like action and dialogue.
Yeah.
What do they do?
Yep.
I mean, what do you see them do? What do they say?
Yep.
And with screenwriting, it's very clear about that. But I think like in some ways, comics has a bit of that structuring as well.
Well, there's so much that goes on between the writer and the artist, especially when it comes to comics, that there's no set amount of how much writing you need to do to make a comic. I know there are writers that'll give extensive panel descriptions and provide photo references, and panel breakdowns, and then you can totally flip that narrative, and then you have Marvel method where the writer is just giving a couple quick lines and the artist is taking off with it, and the writer will come and fill it in after. The way that I write is I start with my dialogue, and I'll give, like you said, some quick lines for action, but I'm not going to tell the artist how he should compose his panel. I'm not the one with the art theory background. They're going to be able to make something look better than I'm going to be able to describe it, as long as they're sticking to the emotional beats that we've established and the same sense or the same vibe that the book is about. I'm not going to complain if they decide to position a camera somewhere different than I imagined it in my head. They're probably going to look better than mine is.
I find, I remember hearing Gaiman talking about it in an interview as well, and he was talking about one of the unique aspects of the comics script versus, say, a screenplay is the conversational tone that it can often acquire. And he was saying he very much apparently writes these scripts like a letter to the illustrator. You know, after at least, and the more so, the more they have like a established working relationship.
Yeah.
And so, like, that relationship between the writer and the artist, I think, is really important. So in terms of, like, you and Stephen working together, now you're not just, like, buddies doing things. Like, now you're working on a project together. Like, how did that relationship start to develop? And what was what worked and what was, you know, maybe, like, hard at the start of that relationship?
At the start, so our working relationship, I like to... he's not here. I'm not going to speak for him. I like to speculate.
You should speak for him.
Yeah, I should just tell him what he actually thinks. Yeah. No, I like to think that our working relationship is built on a lot of mutual respect and a lot of mutual trust. So kind of the first rocky bumps that you come across when you're dealing with or when you're working with someone new is how much criticism can you give them before the relationship becomes contentious. So I dealt, as I said, when I started lettering, I was dealing with writer-artists pairs that were working on their own indie stuff, and on occasion, one or the other would not take feedback from the other one very well, and then it would become kind of this, you know, stony working relationship till they worked their stuff out. For Stephen and I, there wasn't much tiptoeing at the beginning. We were kind of We would tell each other when something wasn't working. So, I mean, if I gave him a script, he'd tell me if the character, whatever dialogue I gave a character wasn't working for the conversation that they were having, or if it seemed out of character. On more than one occasion, I would give him feedback on artwork that he'd sent me and tell him if something didn't look right or didn't look clear or looked weird, or the shadowing was wrong, the kind of stuff. The second pair of eyes that you need when you're making a project. That's one of the things that's kind of an advantage over, that at least for myself, over my own prose writing, is when you're working with comics, you have another person that's kind of on the project all the time with you, that you can bounce things off of. When you're writing on your own, you're just kind of bouncing things off yourself or your editor or your friends. But when you're working with an artist or another creative, they also want this project to be as good as it can be. They're not just going to say something to appease you. They want this to actually be good. So they're willing to push back.
I think one thing that's kind of important to keep in mind when people are having that, the relationship of giving feedback in comics too, is to think about like the difference between how long it takes to draw a page versus how long it takes to write a page.
Oh, it's incredible.
Because it is an incredible difference. And it's not to denigrate one or the other or say one's easier than the other, but there's just is a time difference.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't take 8 hours to
write a page.
3 lines of dialogue.
No,
Even though a lot of work goes into that.
Yeah.
So there's a difference between like giving feedback on like this page of art, I think you just need to be maybe mindful of.
Absolutely.
In terms of like how you approach it.
Absolutely.
And I find that what I've seen, just kind of being a fly on the wall, and seeing like people give feedback to one another, and like people taking it one way or the other.
Yeah.
I find like a lot of times when artists take things poorly is just because the writer just doesn't understand what they're doing.
I can see that.
And doesn't understand, like, maybe they have a point, but they don't understand. They're not like, they're kind of just not thinking of it in terms of like what went into that page.
Yeah.
Or they just don't understand something the artist does understand.
Yeah.
Like how much story you can even get in a page.
No, it's...
or they're just locked into their words for some bizarre reason.
That's the other thing, is that... and that was another common problem that I would witness with writers, was they get so married to their script, they don't realize that there's so much... to back up, the only audience for your script is your artist.
We're in the studio where we always hear these, sirens. So I think it's fun. It adds color, like the atmosphere.
Yeah.
Justin walking around.
The only audience that your script has is for your artist. It's the comic that gets the wider audience. So if you need to tailor your script as the art comes out, because for a stronger impact, you shouldn't get hung up on your words just because they seemed perfect in your head when you wrote them out. Going back to what you were saying, the art takes so much longer than writing a script, and it's easy to overlook that. But it's because artists are working all the time on these things. I can pump out 20 pages in the time it takes of an artist to write one, or to write one page, or to do one page of art.
Well, it's not that they aren't sacrosanct either, but it is a thing to just be mindful of what you're asking for when you ask for a change. And like maybe don't ask for every change.
You need to balance it out.
Think about like when you're asking for one, like ask for, if you have 10 changes to ask for, ask for them at one time. Yeah. Because they're, as opposed to like ask for one, get a page back, ask for another. Yeah. Like but it just kind of go back to something you said. Yeah. So one thing that it seems that you kind of, in some ways it seems we're learning writing as a letterer, kind of observing how these working relationships between these other writers and artists were working. Yeah.
And just to go back, I'm going to answer that, but to go back to part of this disparity in the time into the project was part of what drove me towards being a letterer. Was I'd spend, I don't know, let's say 20 minutes on a page or half hour on a page, and Steven would take 8 hours on a page, and I would be like, I need to be doing more here if I want to be an equal member of this partnership. So I decided to learn lettering too, and there's a lot of upfront work in that, and it still doesn't compare to the amount of time that goes into making art, but it brought the balance a little bit closer. It made me feel like I was bringing a little bit more to the team than just a script. So just some ideas.
And you guys ended up, publishing this comic yourselves. Now, how long did it actually take you to do the comic then, from say like starting to work on it to having a published book?
So I think we broke the story together in May of 2017, and we published it for June of 2018. But
wow. That's pretty quick.
But of that time, I want to say, because Stephen was working full time for most of it, and I was in school full time for most of it. If we compress that into how much time we actually spent working on the book, it's probably about 6 months, probably about half that time.
But still, that's like shockingly fast. Like
we were motivated
for what most people do. You know?
Yeah.
Like, so what? I mean, it's not an unreasonable amount of time.
Yep.
And some people would say it's slow, but
if you're a full-time artist, this is slow.
Full-time artist,
yeah.
But like if you're not, like that's pretty speedy. And I'm curious, like to know, like what kind of kept you really motivated and working on it then, like because. Any project that lasts any length of time like that, you just don't have the motivation every day.
Accountability. Having another person on the team keeps you accountable for your work. You need to get things done so that the next person can do their job. We set a print deadline. We wanted to have our book finished for FanQuest 2018, which had a set date. We knew when it was happening. We knew that we needed to get books into the printer before a certain date to be able to have the books ready to sell for a certain date. So that kept us moving in that period. Stephen and I joke about this to this day. I was always kind of worried that we weren't going to make the deadline because the math in my head said that we were behind schedule. But Stephen kicked it into overdrive in the last probably 2 months of the project, and we hit our deadline with hours to spare. Just hours. Yeah, maybe even minutes to spare. But we got there. We sold a lot of books to start because we'd been hyping it for almost a year at that point, and it's been great since then.
And then when you decided to do this, so this is Infinite Universe we're talking about. The first book that you and Stephen came out with as Radchenka Comics. What's the website where that comic and the other stuff you guys have doing?
So our website is radcall.com. That's radkaul.com. On there is all of our contact information. It has my lettering portfolio. If there's anyone out there who needs some lettering done, you can contact me through there. It has our regular contact info, and it lists where our books can be sold right now. Infinite Universe is available through Comixology. It's available at Galaxy Comics here in Winnipeg. It's available at Another Dimension Comics in Calgary. All other orders we can ship if you're not from Winnipeg. Shipping is not expensive on these books. They fit in a regular mail letterer. And now I'm getting my letters mixed up. It costs $5 to ship a book. That's the bottom line here.
It goes into an envelope.
Yeah, it goes in. It's small enough to fit into an envelope. Nope, it's good. So we can mail them anywhere, but typically we sell them in shows and in person. We're scheduled to be at Calgary's our next show now. We're kind of in the downtime for cons, so Calgary's in the spring.
Why did you decide to do a full color graphic novel as your kind of first foray into?
As opposed to what?
Well, what a lot of people would do is like a smaller, like single issue, 28 pages, 32-page comic.
Yep. It's harder to sell.
Black and white.
It's harder to sell a 32-page comic. So if you take a look at this book,
sure. So you thought like the printing costs.
How are we going to make our money back?
Even though it's more, it'll be better.
Yeah. So
in that sense,
when we looked at. Because the idea was always we wanted to make a comic that we could sell. We didn't want it we didn't want to rely on pitching it to a big publisher on a monthly series. We wanted to have an enclosed story. We wanted to finish a project. The motto was always, no one's going to take us seriously until we finish something.
Did you have Gregory's voice in your head saying that? So he would probably tell most people make like a 3-page comic.
He would tell you to make a 3-page comic.
But at the same time he's always, and I agree with him, talking about you got to finish something, you got to do something.
Yep.
Don't just be pitching yourself as a person who could do something.
Oh yeah, no. When we talk about how we made it, how we got to the end of our first book, dealing with Gregory and Justin probably interwove the whole thing. Gregory was the one who gave me the first handful of books that I needed to read to learn how to make comics. So he's the one that turned me on to Scott McCloud. Justin and Gregory were always available to have time to give us some advice. I'm pretty sure Stephen took their first workshop here in the studio, where he learned how to make comics too. So
there's talk to them both on their podcast, Super Pulp Science.
Yes.
I'll link to that in the show notes to this episode, so people can listen to you two guys talking to them about it.
Yeah. So their influence is interwoven throughout the whole thing. But we ended up to return to answer your question. We wanted a complete book so that we could show that we could finish something, and we wanted something we could sell, which meant that it had to be longer than 20 or 30 pages, which is the average price of your floppy. Because a floppy comic in color is still going to cost you $4 or $5 to sell, and you're not going to sell that for $10. It's too small. In my opinion, it's too small.
4 or 5 to print, you mean? And then
if you were to print it, $4 or $5 to print a full color comic, unless you're printing massive amounts, and we didn't want to print thousands of copies of something. We wanted a couple hundred to see if we could sell it. So we had to kind of meet a sweet spot in terms of length versus cost versus what we could sell it for. And so we ended up with a 64-page comic. It cost us $7 to print per an order of 750, and we sell them for $15. So we have to sell, I'm not going to crunch the math to make our money back. Yeah, we've made our money back on the comic, but we put all of that money into going to shows, into other costs, into our convention display. But it ended up being a sweet spot to balance.
I think the other thing people sometimes don't think about with doing a project like this, and just or any project, just finishing a project, is that you can, if you've got a skill like lettering now, you have something that's more than a portfolio, but is also a portfolio piece, and shows, because one of the things that people are also kind of, if somebody's going to say hire you to do lettering, there's sort of a few things they're looking for. One is are you affordable? Are you good? But the other thing is can you actually finish something? Because a lot of people are really good, but they can't finish, for whatever reason.
Yeah, and I mean, a portfolio piece is what will not last is a large part of. But at this point, I started lettering, let's say, a year and a half ago. This is when I learned. If we don't count the 2.5 months that I struggled through Infinite Universe, but actually started getting projects. And at this point, I've lettered a couple full length books, a number of short projects, whether that it ranges from 2 pages to 12 pages, as well as my own projects. So when I say a couple of books, I'm talking about books that aren't mine. They're someone else's writing and someone else's art, and they've hired me on as freelance work to do the lettering on their books.
And now, again, Infinite Universe, the book that you and Stephen did together, is a standalone kind of graphic novel. And then you followed it up with an anthology. You call it an anthology of beginnings, What Will Not Last. But it's it's basically 4 standalone stories. One of which is sort of a coda or epilogue, or set in the world of Infinite Universe. You call it the epilogue. And you've written all these, but have worked with different artists for each one. And can you talk a bit more about this particular project and kind of where you got the idea to do this and what it is exactly? Because it is a bit of an unusual and interesting book.
It is a weird little book, but it satisfied so many different things that I wanted to accomplish. So Stephen and I had finished Infinite Universe, and then Stephen had a number of other life things come up that comics needed to take a bit of a back seat, which is totally fine. I wanted to push forward, and I had a number of short things that I had in various stages of production. The first book, or the first short story in What Will Not Last, The Watcher, was a short that I had written for Christopher Smith, who was a classmate of Stephen's that Stephen put me in touch with, and we were just testing the waters on a small project. The second was Hero Man. Hero Man is with Zach Schuster, who, funny enough, worked at the comic shop that I would frequent when I lived out in Calgary, and was his own artist, and we joked about doing a short project together. So what this book did was, first off, it allowed me to publish another book. When Stephen decided to take to step away from comics for a little while, I wanted to put out another book, but comics is expensive if you're a writer and you want to pay an artist to do your work. But I wanted another book, and I wanted to have a project that I could get done in a reasonable amount of time. So I decided that I wanted to combine the various short projects that I had into one book and see if I could have them done in time for Calgary Expo 2019. and it served a number of purposes. So as we said, it's 4 different genres with 4 different kind of storytelling tales and lettering methods. So I got to flex those muscles a little bit. What was really important, I think, for someone who wants to get into comics writing that you don't think about is if you're going to work with someone on a long project, you need to know that you can work with them in a conducive way. So having a collection of short comics not only let me get a book done, but it also gave me 3 artists and Steven that I'd never worked with before, and let me find out if I would be able to work on a longer project with them. And what's been great about that is of the 4 artists that are in this book, I currently have 3 books in the works with them, or 3 more books in the works with them, and maybe we can get that 4th one at some point. But there's just so much that this served in terms of being a portfolio piece, as well as being just a way to keep making comics, which is its own special kind of scratch that needs to be itched.
Yeah, I mean, I like the concept a lot because of, as I say, to me, it checks a bunch of different boxes. So one, I think it's just interesting, the idea of doing an anthology where you have the same writer for every book or every story, and yet you've got these other artists coming in. Yeah. And the stories are very different from one another. Yeah. You know, like they're basically different genres. Yeah. You know, you've got kind of a science fiction, a horror, I don't know what you might call it, like kind of like a pulp style. We call it
like a superhero satire.
Yeah, and then you've got the first is more of kind of a fantasy. Yeah. But it's got some horror aspects to it as well. So to me, it's like it's an interesting. In terms of it, in terms of it being a portfolio piece, I mean, it shows the range of styles. Yeah. As a letterer, also you're lettering it in different styles, so showing like the range of your like lettering abilities. You've even got a page or 2 in there where you kind of talk about lettering and your kind of approach to lettering and how you did it. You worked it in this book, but then just on the more artistic or creative side, like it lets you do these different things. And I think one thing that happens a lot. To people in an industry like comics is they get typecast very fast.
Absolutely.
So, you know, you do science fiction into the universe. Well, you're the guy that does science fiction. And, like, it's easy to get stuck in that kind of those modes. And there's good reasons to stick yourself in those modes.
Yeah, some people really love what they're doing. They love those genres.
And, like if you want to... I talk sometimes when I teach screenwriting, like, one of the things you kind of keep in mind... If you were to be an actor, and like there's 2 types of actors fundamentally, right? There's actors who are typecast in one type of role, and there's actors they call character actors who are not. And actors who are typecast make more money, and it's a good career move.
I mean, I know nothing about film, so I'm going to take your word for it.
You know, but you know, and so like on one hand, like being typecast is always talked about as like a negative thing, but it really actually is a sensible, positive career strategy. But at the same time, you know. Maybe you don't want to be typecast.
Yeah, well, the issue with being...
and that's valid path, too. And I think it's important, like, if you don't want, like... So I think it's very smart, like, as soon as you kind of did a thing, you do another thing where you show that you are willing to continue that, but also there's these other things I can do.
Yeah, I mean...
I think it's very clever in that respect, but also just in the creative, like, scratching the itches. Like,
Well, I mean, going back to the idea of being typecast, some people love being typecast, being a solo genre person or like a single sport athlete.
Some people just want to write vampire novels.
That's right. But some people want to be a multi-sport athlete, or they want to do a little bit more of everything. Like, I love writing science fiction. I also really love writing horror. It's a totally different kind of storytelling in certain aspects. I like being able to flex those creative muscles. So the idea that I got to do a little bit of everything, and now these projects are expanding into larger projects, is allowing me to do more of everything.
Well, you also call it anthology beginnings, which I think is really smart, because they are standalone, contained stories, but you can see how they could function as like the first chapter of something.
And one of like our Hero Man chapter story is going to expand into a larger Hero Man story, because Zach and I enjoyed making the project so much. It was so much fun to make fun of superhero comics that we decided we're going to develop a larger book sometime in the future.
Now, just in terms of the kind of back end of how this book is created, so this book, though, you partnered with a publisher called Mythos and Inc., as opposed to putting out as kind of Radchenka comics or whatnot. So you can talk about that, like why you did that, and I presume, like, on one level, it's partly because, Stephen wasn't doing the whole book. But can you talk a bit more about, like, what kind of led you to Mythos and Inc. and how that kind of has been working?
Yeah, so Mythos and Inc. is run by some members in the Winnipeg community. It's a small press. Members in the Winnipeg community that I've worked with through my involvement in the local the local convention scene. They were getting involved in their new small press, and through conversations I had indicated to them that I was starting work on a small anthology collection with a number of local artists and Zach in Calgary. So I guess Canadian artists. Everyone's a Canadian artist. And if they were interested in learning more about it, I'd love to show them the scripts and the art that I had done. And they said they were. And I expressed to them that each of my artists and I have kind of a very different agreements, because obviously when you're doing creative work together, you always want some sort of written agreement or written contract on how rights are going to be split up. I don't own all of these characters. I divide them with the artists that are involved, and I needed a publisher that would kind of be flexible in how we were going to manage the IP rights. So thankfully, Mythos and Inc. is great. They're very friendly to creators, and they were very open to. They know that I'm involved in conventions, and that's not really what the business model for their company is. So our agreement allows me to print books that I can sell in person without having to pay them royalties on it, as well as any books that they distributed. They would still be giving me a large cut of the royalties, which I would then pay to my artists that I owed royalties on, for those that had agreements for royalties.
Can you talk a bit about, like, because I know, like, you're not really an IP law, but, like, your day job involves, lawyering.
There's a lot of stuff involved.
A lot of stuff. And so, like, I think this is a really neglected area when people kind of move into doing anything together.
Yeah.
But especially, like, a medium like comics, where, you're often partnering with people, is like having some sort of agreement. Not that it has to be, like, a complex.
Yep. No, it doesn't have to be complex.
You at least need, like, some basic agreement, right? Like, so that to avoid, like, argumentation later.
Yeah.
Or even just, even if you all get along perfectly, you need to be able to trace, when you start selling to somebody else, you need to be able to trace back, like, what's the chain of title.
Yeah, well, and that was something, if we're going to go back to things that Gregory has taught us, was very early on, he reminded us you should get a contract. We have a contract for everything. I come from a legal background, so I would have gone to that eventually, but it's called a clear chain of title, and it's in case you do get involved with a third party who's interested in acquiring certain rights for your product. It establishes who owns what and to what degree that they own that. So when you're looking at rights, you always want to think of what's going to be done with these characters, not just in the form of this book, but if it were to carry forward. Now, we're not going to pretend that that our books are going to turn into movies or anything. Maybe they'll turn into movies, but we're not going to assume they're going to turn into movies. But you always want to consider, when you're coming up with a contract, who gets to sell what and how much do you owe the other person? Do you owe them anything?
They have to agree.
Exactly.
If you want to sell it to publisher.
Exactly.
Etc.
Yeah. So there's a lot that goes into it. I'm of the advice that if you know kind of what you want, you should still get it written down in writing. Consider a lawyer if you can afford a lawyer, or someone who is familiar with that sort of field. But you're right in that there's a lot of things that creators don't necessarily protect themselves or think of when they're thinking about intellectual property.
Yeah, I don't think it needs to be complicated. And you can't give out legal advice on this podcast.
No,
but at the same time, I think there's things that people don't necessarily think about. Like, anytime I've got an idea that I really want to pursue, I've got this idea for this character that I'm going to do different things with. And the character's name is Lee the She-Wolf, and I'm I've been doing little things and doing scripts and doing writing and talking to people and companies about the idea in various forms. Yeah. But one of the first things I did, because I knew it was kind of a fuzzy idea in the sense that I had literary things I wanted to do with it, and then I had comics and film sort of ways I wanted to be approaching it and talking. So one of the first things I did was I just paid Gregory to draw me a picture of Lee the She-Wolf, and I got him to give me an invoice, and I paid the invoice. And now everything can get traced back to I got a work for hire
Yep.
of Lee the She-Wolf.
Yep.
Here's what it looks like.
Yep.
Even if it doesn't, so it's part of my pitch
Yep.
materials.
Yep.
It also like establishes that I own this thing.
Yep.
Here's a concretized,
Yeah.
version of it.
Yep. Because I mean, you can't copyright an idea. You can copyright a thing that you make, but you can't copyright an idea.
Yeah, and if you can, in this case, I was too busy to even work on it, so I just paid somebody else to draw me a picture.
Yeah.
Because I paid them, and the contract was,
work for hire. Yeah.
Work for hire. Well, now I've weirdly set the IP in my stone, even though I didn't write anything at that point. I later have since written things, but but now you can trace a chain title back to
Absolutely.
that, right?
Absolutely. So there's I was lucky enough that the publisher that I approached was very malleable in terms of the way that the IP rights were divvied out, because they don't own the rights to my characters, our characters. They own the rights to distribute the book. And there's a big difference there. Like if you're working, like DC owns Batman, Marvel owns Spider-Man. It doesn't matter what creative you are. You can be the best Spider-Man writer in the world, but you don't own Spider-Man. You can't make money off of Spider-Man. All those people are still work for hire, artists. That's why Todd McFarlane left Marvel to create Image Comics, because he wanted to own his own IPs.
Yeah, I mean, it gets very weird. I think it starts to sound very weird and businessy to people when you're talking about chain of title and legal issues.
Yeah.
But it
comes down to what you own.
But on a simple level too, it just comes down to if you're going to work with somebody else, you just have an agreement. What happens if we start to hate each other?
Yeah.
Or we just don't agree. We get along, but we don't agree on something. Who has got the vote?
Yeah. If you listen to Super Pulp Science episode 15 that Steven and I were on, we all joke about how your contract is basically your prenup for when you break up in comics. It tells you what's going to happen to the kids. So that's what it's just worthwhile.
And even if you still get along, but somebody bought it from you, it kind of again is a level of protection in the sense of, in whatever sense.
Yeah, it just sets out the rules and what you can expect and what's going to happen.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people, if they actually go through that process, will sometimes find out oh, you know what, we can't work together and still be friends. So let's just not work together.
Yeah, and still be friends.
And it'd be better and still be friends. And I think sometimes that people avoid. Hammering out even the cocktail and napkin version of that agreement, because they think somehow it's too businessy and it'll poison the artistic relationship. And I think in so many cases it safeguards the artistic relationship.
Yeah. I mean, if you can't have a business relationship with someone, maybe you shouldn't be working with them. This is just, I understand that there's a vague notion of artistic integrity in the world, but at some point, if you want to make a living out of it, you have to start treating it as more than just art. You also have to treat yourself like a business. Well,
I think even if you don't go, even if you want to I think so often these ideas of artistic integrity are actually, they're just amateur ideas of that are non-artistic and lack integrity.
Yeah.
Whereas, if you I don't see what has more integrity than we will have an agreement that we both are the owners of this thing.
Yeah. No, I agree. There's the common joke about romanticizing the creative process, but at some point you have to be realistic about how the world works. And that sounds so cynical to say as I'm saying it, but there's so much more that goes into it. And if you want to, protect yourself and you want to be able to keep doing what you love, there are certain considerations you need to think about.
Can you talk about the hero, just to kind of dive down specifically into what will not last? So you've got this Hero Man idea. Talk a little bit about that specific issue and kind of maybe where that idea came from and kind of how it developed a little bit.
Yeah, I mean,
or even just walk through all four of those stories a little bit in terms of their origins for you and how that they developed maybe differently when you started connecting the artists.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, I'm going to start at the end, then I'm going to start with the Infinite Universe epilogue. When I decided I wanted to do this project, I still wanted to work with Steven some more. We'd kind of left Infinite Universe. We'd left the story pretty wide open at the end of it, so I wanted a little bit more closure. I just asked, "Hey, I know you're super busy. It would be great if we could do, a short chapter at the end that kind of wraps up a couple of our story threads." And Steven, he still likes comics. He still liked comics. He still wanted to do comics, so he just didn't have all the time. So we still decided to do a short chapter of it. The Watcher, which is the fantasy, the Minotaur fantasy, we'll call it, for Chris Smith. Chris, because he approached me about working together, he'd sent me his portfolio, and Chris loves drawing monsters.
Had he read Infinite Universe, so how did he get to approaching you?
So he knew Steven through school, and I had met him at FanQuest when we launched Infinite Universe, and he approached Steven about wanting to do some comics work too, and asked Steven if I'd be interested in working with him, which absolutely, if an artist wants to work with you always want to work with someone. So I looked at his portfolio, and it was a lot of monster stuff, and it. Looking at his work, looking at his portfolio inspired the story, because I wanted to do kind of a monstery tale, but I didn't really know what, and I don't know how I landed on Minotaurs, but I decided I want to do a Minotaur story, but I felt really bad for Chris during most of that project because there's not a lot of big action scenes to it. It's very emotional, story-driven storytelling, and that script I think I wrote in a day. Like, it just worked really, it just kind of flowed. Again, dialogue first, and I got to be a little bit more creative in terms of a dialogue, emotional driven story, whereas Infinite Universe there was some dialogue, but it was a lot of more action beat, little twist, action beat type storytelling. Hero Man, if you look at the art style, it's fairly I know that Zach is very Mignola style, and both of us, he worked at a comic shop that I would go to all the time, so we both like to talk comics and what was new and popular. And there was one day I was just daydreaming. I was at the gym, I think. Most of my story ideas come when I'm at the gym. But I was daydreaming of a story where there was a superhero who was being a superhero based on a lie. So the idea of the story is that the whole idea that he's a superhero is all to benefit the city and not because there's any real trouble. Like that for once the police are very competent, everyone is very normal, and when you just have a superhero who's super popular and brings in tourism money, and all the destruction that he causes allows the city to raise income tax and property tax and all these other more real world things, but it really just came down to wanting to make fun of a lot of the tropes in comics. So we often joke that he wouldn't realize that the thug that he beat up last week that was sent to jail was then released from jail, and why did that happen? Or that the thugs weren't ever they were always coming at him one at a time, as opposed to the more practical swarm in real life, that he was able to fend them off one at a time. So it just became a fun project of making fun of superheroes, and Zach's art style just fit that type of storytelling so well that it seemed like a natural fit, that we'd already been talking about doing something together. I'd been talking about it with Steven, and we'd talked about working on it too, but it just seemed like such a fit for Zach that I told Steven, I'm going to see if Zach's interested in it first, and he was.
And then Gregory, GMB Kubitschek, you had known previously, but then, that kind of weird nightmare.
Yeah, yes.
Horror story kind of gravitated towards that style.
Yes. So that one
must have been one where you knew the style, of course.
No, this is the weirdest one, was the story The Light Under the Door, which is a story that GMB Kubitschek and I did. Started off as the cold open to a longer horror story that Steven and I had been talking about, set in the 70s. We wanted to tell a 70s winter horror story about a ghost or a demon, whatever evil thing you want to classify it as, that took the form of the things that you'd lost and loved. And when I was trying to put together the works for this book, I have a full script written for this story, but for the longer story, yeah, it's a 100-page story, but I had the script written, and I looked at the cold open and looked at it and thought, this could be a standalone story in itself, but I need another artist for it, and I had no idea who I was going to going to work with. So I actually started shopping for artists. I wanted to do a full work for hire agreement. And not knowing anything about art, I would I approached Gregory and said, hey, I know you're super busy with your own comics, like, or else I would have gone to him, but he's always so busy doing stuff. I said, I'm going to start looking for an artist. I'm going to send you some of the ones, my favorites. Do you mind giving me an opinion? You can tell me who you think is, legit and who's not legit, because you never know who you're going to meet on the internet. So I'd started sending him some samples, and I showed him the story. And at one point, he messaged me and he said, if you can make it work in this time frame, I can do this comic, but we're gonna do a Marvel method. And absolutely, I would work with Gregory any day over someone on the internet.
And can you just describe quickly Marvel method?
Yeah, and I'll get to that. Is when Gregory and I met up to talk about this story, we kind of went through the story beats and kind of what the images that I had in my head and kind of what he has his own distinctive style. But Marvel method is the idea that the artist is going to dictate a lot of what the story looks like. It's going to dictate the paneling and the pacing and how things look. And that stems from when Stan Lee was doing all of Marvel's comics, or felt like all of Marvel's comics. In early Marvel days, he and Jack Kirby and his artists would team up, and Stan would write like a 1-page synopsis of a full 22-page issue. The artists would go and then do the art for that whole issue, and then Stan would come back and write the actual script for it. So when Gregory and I met up to discuss this, I think we walked away with just the story of there's a boy dreaming about his parents perishing in a car accident. He wakes up and the ghost of his mom is at his door, and at the end it turns out that the mom is the monster of the story. Was the entirety of the direction I gave Gregory. There was no script to it. We were just, here's our 3 beats. Gregory did some doodling in his notebook, and we were off. I gave him a print deadline, and we were off to the races. And I didn't hear from him for a long time until the week prior to the deadline, and then the pages all came in at once, and I had to go and letter them, which is its own unique challenge, writing a story without a script. Yeah, with the actual art that you didn't have a script for beforehand. So that was kind of my first foray into doing Marvel method writing, but something that I would do again.
I've done some stuff with Gregory along similar lines, although I had more of a script. But it's funny because me and Gregory are always like scrambling. We've been really like scrambling to figure out like how can we work together on this project. Yeah. Again, I've got like 100 pages of material, and can we get this grant to cover this much and do this and like just trying to figure out the logistics of how we could work together.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we're very aware that like 15 years ago, back when I met Gregory, and like we kind of started hanging out.
Yeah.
We were just like we should have just done what you guys did. We should have just done it.
Yeah. No, and I mean that just brings us back to the idea that even like as we said, it takes a writer 20 pages or 20 minutes to write a page, and it takes an artist 8 hours to do art for a page. Their time is very valuable, and making comics, if you're a writer that has no artistic talent like me, is very expensive if you're gonna pay your artist for each page that they're making. So you have to find a way to make for it to be worthwhile for them too. And the better they are, the more expensive they are.
Well, and the more demand they are.
Absolutely.
And it's only certain factors, but I just like I think to what you were saying before in terms of like you met Steve here and you met this guy here in this way. Like so often, I think when I teach classes, especially like so often students neglect the value of their peer group and the people around them. Like in many ways, like the most important like thing you're going to get out of a creative writing. The most important thing I got out of my creative writing class. Or classes like when I went to university, I took this great creative writing class with Dennis Cooley, who was a big, influence on me and taught me a lot in that class. But as much as I learned in that class, the most valuable part of it was I met Gregory Kmichik. I met my friend Slim and Oaz. Like I met a bunch of people that to this day I still know and like or have worked with in various capacities, or am trying to work with or whatever. Yeah. And I think in some ways, like especially when you're younger or you're just starting out, however old you are, I think often you neglect like the value of the person who also is trying to break through like you are. Yeah. But maybe is more readily available to work with. Yeah. Oh yeah. And as just like you needs, the credits and needs the experience and needs to learn and can learn from the collaboration, and so on.
I mean, especially when it comes to comics, is you're going to get more done working with someone else than you're going to get working on your own. We're not going to get too business about it or too technical about it, but it's almost like it's a passive version of networking. Like if you're just nice to people, if you are someone who is pleasant to work with, people will want to work with you to be able to do more.
Well, that's the other thing is like that also gets around, like because another thing people are considering when they want to like who should I work with to do this comic is like, well, you want somebody who can do the work, who can finish it, who you can afford, and who is not isn't horrible to be around, or to like communicate with, and so on, right?
One of the big jokes in comics is that there's to be a professional, there are kind of three main qualities. There's you're really good to work with, or you're always like you always hit your deadlines. And if you can be two of those three things, you can be a professional. You can be a professional comics maker.
That's also a Neil Gaiman quote.
Yeah. Okay.
From his "Make Great Art" speech.
Okay.
But yeah, it's completely true. And if you can be all three, you're made in the shade.
Oh, that's it. You're done. Yeah.
But certainly, like I think for reasons that of course make sense. Like people tend to undervalue like the. They're always, I think, especially if they're trying to break through or starting out or whatever. I think so often you're looking up to somebody who's further along in your career than you are.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, well, how can I do that? Maybe they can help me, or maybe they can tell me what to do. Yeah. And maybe that's true, but so often like the solution is what they did was they hung out with their buddies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they were doing stuff together, and they were, just the more achievable thing that they could do was what they actually did.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a fine line, right? Because you always want to surround yourself with people that you want to be like, and you're lifted up by the people around you, especially when they're better at something than you are. That's how you learn how to be better. But at the same time, you want to be like, you need to be able to work with people, and you don't want to just be that guy who's sucking up to someone above them, because then you're that guy and no one wants to work with you. You're just someone who's doing things for their own self-interest. And maybe you're doing something for your own self-interest, but that doesn't mean you can't be doing something with someone else.
Yeah, and helping. I often say like the best way to network is just to help other people do things.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Who could you help out? And networking just kind of becomes this weird function of helping other people around you out.
Yeah.
I also think people tend to overvalue like networking itself.
Yeah, I mean,
but obviously it is important in certain ways, but it's usually not important in the way you think.
Yeah. Like
I always say, my first book was rejected by publishers for 3 years, and one of the publishers that rejected me was this person I was playing Words with Friends on Facebook with at the time. So we were playing this version of Scrabble on Facebook, and there was literally a point where in our relationship where I played my move in Words with Friends, and then she made her move, and then she wrote me a rejection letter while I was making my move.
Yeah.
And then she sent me the rejection letter. That was her move. But it's and it's your friends often, your network and your friends often get you faster rejections.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It more so than they get you acceptances in many respects. You get their acceptances, and your friends, they can maybe be helpful, but often the help is they tell you, no, don't send that out. Or, it's an indirect thing often. It's very rare that a person will, open this door for you. And even if they do, often it's a bad thing for you to step through the door because you're not ready.
I could see that one. being true.
Do you know what I mean? It depends, of course, and everything's different. But I always find the most effective and useful and just nicest way to quote unquote network is just who's near you that you could help out and do cool things with.
Yeah, I mean, I think a large part of it is being don't get me wrong. You always have to keep an eye open for a good opportunity.
Sure.
You're ready to take it when you can. But you also have to be realistic about what you can and can't do. Mm-hmm. I've turned down work from publishers before, lettering work from publishers before, because I was concerned I wouldn't be able to meet the deadline. and I didn't want to take on
Nothing worse than
something.
not making that deadline,
I didn't want to take on a project that I wouldn't be able to deliver on, or at least deliver the quality on. And maybe I should have said yes to that project and found a way to make it work. I'll never know that now. But when I said no, it was because I didn't want to burn a bridge by doing poor work. So you always have to be kind of know your limits, and then know when you can push those limits, because there are times when you're going to have to, especially if you want to grow. But it's about being self-aware with what you're doing.
Well, do you know what you're doing next? Like, you're working on these different projects, trying to expand them outwards. Is that your kind of core creative focus at the moment?
Yeah, I've got 3 books that I've got in the works right now. I'm not going to announce 2 of them yet. I'll announce 1 just because we don't have titles on 2 of them yet. Our Stephen and I's next book, and he's going to hate me for announcing this without him because he's not here, is called There Was Another Life. We're set for a late 2020 publishing date. We don't have a firm date yet. The artwork, or the cover, should be available for Halloween. So I'm assuming by the time you listen to this, you'll be able to see the cover. You can find it on both my Instagram, Steven's Instagram, and at radcall.com.
This will go out just in December, so it won't be.
So this will be long gone. All right, perfect.
It'll already have been announced.
Maybe we'll have announced the other 2 then.
You're not scooping him.
Okay.
Whatever announcements you want to engineer. But yeah, so you're doing that as Radcall Comics again, or
we're gonna start working on it as a solo project to self-publish, and if it gets picked up in the process, that we're open to that too. That's kind of been our business. That was our business model for the first one. We're in discussions to have Infinite Universe be picked up by a publisher also right now, and that's all a product of having finished it first. So if we're going to take away some practical advice before we go, we're just going to circle back and say, if you want to do something, go do it, and then you'll figure out the rest as you go.
My great career advice to people is you should just be always doing things.
Do it, yeah. I mean, so many people
doing things.
Well, you meet so many people that are talking about how they're going to do something. I don't trust someone who says they're going to do something. Come check in when it's done.
Gregory and Justin are always saying that. We're in their studio here recording this.
Yeah.
And I hear less than they do from people getting like, oh, I got this great idea.
Yeah.
But even I get it a lot.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine how often they hear it. Never mind, like...
Every other person's working on their novel right now.
I was just working on my novel before you showed up.
There you go. But you've actually finished a novel or a book before.
But it's whatever, right? Like, it doesn't matter. I'm still working on it.
Yeah.
It's nothing.
Yeah. I don't like to talk about a project until it's done or it's almost done. I'll say, I'm working on this, but I don't tell anyone I'm working on it until there's some tangible evidence of work being done.
90% done means you're still not done.
Exactly.
And you might as well have not started.
I don't want to go that far.
From the point of view of an outside observer, it's all the same to them because you haven't finished.
Yeah, it's no good to them until it's done.
It's no good to anyone until it's done, and you need to be in the habit of finishing things, and you can't get in the habit of finishing things unless you're doing things.
Yeah.
So it's like you kind of have to balance you should be doing things, and you should be finishing things, then you should be doing more things. And you don't want to be haphazard or...
Do things as you're finishing things.
Yeah, you don't want to be like... I think it's very easily to kind of get into that, paralysis by analysis and be overthinking, your next move when you haven't even made this move yet.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a part of it is, you got to compartmentalize. It's really easy to get caught up in the big picture stuff and just stall out. You have to be moving forward on the little picture stuff all the time. So whether it's, go home and write 1 page tonight. If you do 1 page a day, by the end of the year, you'll have 365 pages. There's your book. If you do nothing, you're going to have nothing.
Yep. Well, I appreciate you talking to me. And again, if you go to, is it Radcall Comics?
RADKAUL.com.
You can get both Infinite Universe and What Will Not Last, which will also be available from Mythos and Inc. But at the second that we're talking, it's at that website primarily.
Well, hopefully by the time they hear this, it'll be available through Mythos.
And also, again, I'll at writingthewrongway.com, I'll link to that link, but also to the Super Pulp Science podcast and the episode that Stephen and Lyndon are on. Do you have any kind of last words of advice for somebody who's just kind of starting to get interested in comics writing?
Two things. The first is I was happy to be invited on the show because it's called Writing the Wrong Way, and I feel like I've spent my whole life writing the wrong way. So I think that's the big takeaway too, is that at the end of the day, there's no real rules in how you're going to do something. You just have to find a way to get it. You have to get it done. So as a writer, you're going to come across, a day job. Everyone's got a day job, and then you have to make writing your second job until it can become your main job. And there's no formula into doing that. You just have to find ways to make things in the margins of your life. I think you have to keep enjoying doing the things that you enjoy doing, and find the time where you can. You always make time for the things that matter. And if doing this is what matters to you, then you're going to have enough time to do it at the end of the day, as long as you stick to it.
Well, great. Well, thanks very much for talking to me, and keep writing the wrong way.